Thus far, in our discussions, we have been talking about the present tense, and we have discussed the two following categories. We have discussed regular present tense AR, ER, and IR verbs, and we have also discussed irregular in yo form verbs, or irregular in the first person singular. Today what we're going to talk about is the third category of verbs, which is irregular stem changing. One of the important things to remember always when dealing with irregular verbs is that the endings won't change. Remember, when we talked about irregular in first person, we said that the endings represent who is speaking and where we are in time. So that means that the ending won't change even if we're in the irregular stem changing. So what is it that we mean when we say irregular stem changing? Literally what we're saying is that the stem is going to change before we can tack on the appropriate ending in the present tense. So how would that really work? Well, first of all, for stem changers, we have to remember that we have three different categories of verbs that stem change, and they will stem change in three different ways. The first type is an O becomes UE, such as with the verb dormir and morir. What that is to say then is that this O right here in the middle of morir or dormir will literally be dropped out, and then it will be replaced with a UE before you can even put your ending on to form the conjugation. So it adds just a little bit of an extra step in your process. There's a second category, and that is E becomes IE, such as with preferir and pensar. With these verbs, you will drop out this E in pensar, and you always choose, if you have multiple syllables with a verb, you're always going to choose whichever syllable it is that is closest to the ending. So in this case, right, you have two E's available, but the one that is closest to the ending is this one right here. So you will choose this E, and you would literally take that E out and replace it with an IE before you could put your ending on. We also have a third category, which is E becomes IE, such as with pedir and servir. In this case, this E and this E will be removed and they will be replaced with an I. Now, how do you know which verbs are in which category? Unfortunately, there's really only one way to know, and that's to just memorize which verbs fall into which category. It is the way of life that sometimes memorization is really the only way to know, because this is just so different from the way that we do it in English. There's really not going to be any way for you to kind of remember or appropriate it to something that we do in the English language. It really is kind of a unit unto itself. So you would probably need to memorize which verbs fit into which category. So what we want to think then is, how would that really work? So how would I form a real verb conjugation using irregular stem changing and kind of filling all that out? Well, I've listed for us a large example right here using this verb right here, dormir, which is an example of an O becomes UE. You can see that in my conjugation, not all the verbs have stem changed. Let's read them together. So it would be yo duermo, tú duermes, él, ella, usted duerme, nosotros dormimos, vosotros dormís, ellos, ellas, ustedes duermen. So notice that there are 4 that stem change and 2 that maintain the original root of the verb. There are 4 that stem change. They stem change inside this conjugation. This is often called the boot. So when you want to remember which are the verbs that stem change, it is easy to remember that they are always going to stem change inside the boot. That is to say, the 4 that remain inside this little boot here are the ones that are going to stem change, and the other ones will remain the same. So you can see here that the O has been taken out and replaced with a UE. And here, and here again. And notice that all of the endings are regular. These are regular present tense IR endings. This is O, ES, E, IMOS, IS, and EN, just like with any other IR verb in the present tense. Now let's practice, or let's look at how this would work with maybe an E becomes IE and an E becomes I. I've given a small example down here with pensar. So here you can see, right, it forms the exact same conjugation inside this little boot area here, and I have literally replaced my E with an IE. So it becomes pienso, piensas, piensa, pensamos, pensáis, piensan. Here they have all been replaced, and here it has maintained the original integrity of the verb. Again, with pedir, it has done the same thing. I have taken the E out and I have literally replaced it with an I, but only inside the boot formation. So here I have pido, pides, pide, pedimos, pedís, piden. Now, what happens if I forget to stem change the verb? Well, unfortunately, yo duermo doesn't actually mean anything in Spanish. Similar to yo pienso is not actually a word. So if you forget to stem change, you're moving from communication to gibberish. Sometimes you will move from communication to another word that actually has nothing to do with the verb that you're trying to talk about. So stem changing is important as far as communication is concerned, and you really do need to do it. All right, now that we have learned how to conjugate stem changing verbs, what I would like for you to do is just practice a little bit. First, on the first side of a note card, I would like you to conjugate maybe one form, like O becomes UE, and pick one and conjugate it on the front. On the back, I would like for you to conjugate the other two forms. So the E becomes I and the E becomes IE. And I would like for you to pick one of each kind just to conjugate it on a note card and then pop it on the corkboard whenever you get into class. And I will check it whenever I get a moment. And of course, as always, be prepared to share just in case I decide to call on you. Thanks, and I will see you in class.